What's happening, everybody? So this video is going to cover pages 123 through 133 of Fahrenheit 451. There's going to be a total of 3 journal entries for this section, and we'll stop mid-reading for 2 of them, and then there'll be 1 at the end of the section that we're reading today. All right, so we're going to jump right back in on page 123. Let's set the scene. Montag is on the run. That's what happens when you set someone on fire. The authorities want to talk to you, and so Montag's on the run. And based on what we saw last section, just being out and walking around is a relatively dangerous activity. Look how he almost got killed crossing the street, and like he looked both ways and everything. So anyway, we're about page 123, about halfway down. Ready? The house was silent. Montag approached from the rear, creeping through a thick, night-moistened scent of daffodils and roses and wet grass. He touched the screen door and back, found it open, slipped in, moved across the porch, listening. Mrs. Black, are you asleep in there? He thought. This isn't good, but your husband did it to others and never asked and never wondered and never worried. And now, since you're a fireman's wife, it's your house and your turn for all the houses your husband burned and the people he hurt without thinking. The house did not reply. He hid the books in the kitchen and moved from the house again to the alley and looked back, and the house was still dark and quiet, sleeping. On his way across town with the helicopters fluttering like torn bits of paper in the sky, he phoned the alarm at a lonely phone booth outside a store that was closed for the night. Then he stood in the cold night air, waiting, and at a distance, he heard the fire sirens start up and run, and the salamanders coming to burn Mr. Black's house while he was away at work, to make his wife stand shivering in the morning air while the roof let go and dropped in upon the fire. But now she was still asleep. Good night, Mrs. Black, he thought. And that's where we're going to stop for our first reading journal. On the left of our journal, I noted that on pages 123 and 124, Montag stops at Mr. and Mrs. Black's house, and he drops off a book. And if you're wondering who Mr. Black is, Stoneman and Black were fellow firefighters. He was one of the guys he clonked in the head and knocked out right after he set Captain Beatty on fire. Now, on the right, this is where your work comes in. Briefly explain Guy Montag's devious plan against Mr. Black. Now, this was a plan that was kind of first thought up when Montag first went to Faber's. But if you don't remember that conversation between those two, I don't even think you necessarily need it. If you look carefully at the events that just happened, I think you can piece this together yourself. All right, we're going to continue on page 124. Faber. Another rap, a whisper, and a long waiting. Then, after a minute, a small light flickered inside Faber's small house. After another pause, the back door opened. They stood looking at each other in the half-light. Faber and Montag, as if each did not believe in the other's existence. Then Faber moved and put out his hand and grabbed Montag and moved him in and sat down and went back and stood in the door listening. The sirens were wailing off in the morning distance. He came in and shut the door. Montag said, I've been a fool all down the line. I can't stay long. I'm on my way, God knows where. At least you were a fool about the right things, said Faber. I thought you were dead. The audio capsule I gave you, burnt. I heard the captain talking to you and suddenly there was nothing. I almost came out looking for you. The captain's dead. He found the audio capsule. He heard your voice. He was going to trace it. I killed him with a flamethrower. Faber sat down and did not speak for a time. My God, how did this happen? Said Montag. It was only the other night. Everything was fine. And the next thing I know, I'm drowning. How many times can a man go down and still be alive? I can't breathe. There's Beatty dead, and he was my friend once, and there's Millie gone. I thought she was my wife, but now, I don't know. And the house all burnt, and my job gone, and myself on the run. And I planted a book in a fireman's house on the way. Good Christ, the things I've done in a single week. You did what you had to do. It was coming on for a long time. Yes, I believe that. If there's nothing else, I believe. It saved itself up to happen. I could feel it for a long time. I was saving something up. I went around doing one thing and feeling another. God, it was all there. I wonder it didn't show on me like fat. And now, here I am, messing up your life. They might follow me here. I feel alive for the first time in years, said Faber. I feel I'm doing what I should have done a lifetime ago. For a little while, I'm not afraid. Maybe it's because I'm doing the right thing at last. Maybe it's because I've done a rash thing and don't want to look the coward to you. I suppose I'll have to do even more violent things, exposing myself so I won't fall down on the job and turn scared again. What are your plans? To keep running? You know the war's on, I heard. God, isn't it funny, said the old man. It seems so remote because we have our own troubles. I haven't had time to think. Montag drew out $100. I want this to stay with you. Use it any way that'll help when I'm gone. But I might be dead by noon. Use this. Faber nodded. You better head for the river if you can. Follow along it. And if you could hit the old railroad lines going out into the country, follow them. Even though practically everything's airborne these days and most of the tracks are abandoned, the rails are still there, rusting. I've heard there are still hobo camps all across the country, here and there. Walking camps, they call them. And if you keep walking far enough and keep an eye peeled, they say there's lots of old Harvard degrees on the tracks between here and Los Angeles. Most of them are wanted and hunted in the cities. They survive, I guess. There aren't many of them, and I guess the government's never considered them great enough danger to go in and track them down. You might hole up with them for a time and get in touch with me in St. Louis. I'm leaving on the 5 a.m. bus this morning to see a retired printer there. I'm getting out into the open myself at last. The money will be put to good use. Thanks and God bless you. Do you want to sleep for a few minutes? I'd better run. Let's check. He took Montag quickly into the bedroom and lifted a picture frame aside, revealing a television screen the size of a postal card. I always wanted something very small, something I could talk to, something I could blot out with the palm of my hand if necessary. Nothing that could shout me down, nothing monstrous big. So you see, he snapped it on. Montag, the TV set said and lit up. M-O-N-T-A-G, the name was spelled out by the voice. Guy Montag, still running. Police helicopters are up. A new mechanical hound has been brought in from another district. Montag and Faber looked at each other. Mechanical hound never fails. Never since its first use in tracking quarry has this incredible invention made a mistake. Tonight, this network is proud to have the opportunity to follow the hound by camera helicopter as it starts on its way to the target. Faber poured 2 glasses of whiskey. We'll need these. They drank. No so sensitive the mechanical hound can remember and identify 10,000 odor indexes on 10,000 men without resetting. Faber trembled the least bit and looked about at his house, at the walls, the door, the doorknob, and the chair where Montag now sat. Montag saw the look. They both looked quickly about the house, and Montag felt his nostrils dilate, and he knew that he was trying to track himself, and his nose was suddenly good enough to sense the path he had made in the air of the room, and the sweat of his hand hung from the doorknob, invisible. But as numerous as the jewels of the small chandelier, he was everywhere, in and on and about everything. He was a luminous cloud, a ghost that made breathing once more impossible. He saw Faber stop up his own breath for fear of drawing that ghost into his own body, perhaps, being contaminated with the phantom exhalations and odors of a running man. The mechanical hound is now landing by helicopter to site of the burning. And there in the small screen was the burnt house, and the crowd, and something with a sheet over it. And out of the sky, fluttering, came the helicopter like a grotesque flower. So they must have their game out, thought Montag. The circus must go on, even with war beginning within the hour. He watched the scene, fascinated, not wanting to move. It seemed so remote, and no part of him. It was a play apart and separate, wondrous to watch, not without its strange pleasure. That's all for me, he thought. That's all taking place just for me, my God. If he wished, he could linger here in comfort and follow the entire hunt on through its swift phases, down alleys, across streets, over empty running avenues, crossing lots and playgrounds with pauses here or there for the necessary commercials, up other alleys to see the burning house of Mr. and Mrs. Black, and so on finally to this house, with Faber and himself seated, drinking, while the electric hound snuffed down the last trail, silent as a drift of death itself, skidded to a halt outside that window there. Then, if he wished, Montag might rise, walk to the window, keep one eye on the TV screen, open the window, lean out, look back, and see himself dramatized, described, made over, standing there, limned into the bright small television screen from outside. A drama to be watched objectively, knowing that in other parlors he was large as life, in full color, dimensionally perfect. And if he kept his eye peeled quickly, he would see himself an instant before oblivion, being punctured for the benefit of how many civilian parlor sitters who had been awakened from sleep a few minutes ago by the frantic sirening of their living room walls to come watch the big game, the hunt, the one-man carnival. That's a crazy detail, isn't it? When there's something really good on television, their television set wakes them up so they can come watch the good show. Would he have time for a speech as the hound seized him in view of 10 or 20 or 30 million people? Mightn't he sum up his entire life in the last week in one single phrase or a word that would stay with them long after the hound had turned, clenching him in its metal plier jaws, and trotted off in darkness while the camera remained stationary, watching the creature dwindle in the distance, a splendid fade out? What could he say in a single word, a few words that would sear all their faces and wake them up? "There," whispered Faber. Out of a helicopter glided something that was not machine, not animal, not dead, not alive, glowing with a pale green luminosity. It stood near the smoking ruins of Montag's house, and the man brought his discarded flamethrower to it and put it down under the muzzle of the hound. There was whirring, clicking, humming. Montag shook his head and got up and drank the rest of his drink. "It's time. I'm sorry about this." "About what? Me? My house? I deserve everything. Run, for God's sakes. Perhaps I can delay them here. Wait, there's no use your being discovered. When I leave, burn the spread of this bed that I touched. Burn the chair in the living room and your wall incinerator. Wipe down the furniture with alcohol. Wipe the doorknobs. Burn the throw rug in the parlor. Turn the air conditioning on full in all the rooms and spray with moth spray if you have it. Then turn on your lawn sprinklers as high as they'll go and hose off the sidewalks. With any luck at all, we can kill the trail in here anyway." Faber shook his hand. "I'll tend to it. Good luck. If we're both in good health, next week, the week after, get in touch. General delivery, St. Louis. I'm sorry there's no way I can go with you this time, by your phone. That was good for both of us. But my equipment was limited. You see, I never thought I would use it. What a silly old man. No thought there. Stupid. So I haven't another green bullet, the right kind, to put in your head. Go now. One last thing, quick. A suitcase. Get it? Fill it with your dirtiest clothes, an old suit. The dirtier the better. A shirt, some old sneakers and socks." Faber was gone and back in a minute. They sealed the cardboard valves with clear tape. "To keep the ancient odor of Mr. Faber in, of course," said Faber, sweating at the job. Montag doused the exterior of the valves with whiskey. "I don't want that hound picking up two odors at once. May I take this whiskey? I'll need it later. Christ, I hope this works." They shook hands again, and going out of the door, they glanced at the TV. The hound was on its way, followed by hovering helicopter cameras, silently sniffing the great night wind. It was running down the first alley. "Goodbye." And Montag was out the back door, lightly, running with the half-empty valves. Behind him, he heard the lawn sprinkling system jump up, filling the air with rain that fell gently, and then with a steady pour all about, washing the sidewalks and draining into the alley. He carried a few drops of this rain with him on his face. He thought he heard the old man call goodbye, but he wasn't certain. He ran very fast away from the house, down toward the river. We're going to stop there for a journal entry. So with this one, on the left, I noted that on pages 124 through 130, this scene takes place at Faber's house. And on the right, what I'd like you to do is I want you to comment on this change that we've seen within Faber. And what kind of change I'm talking about. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to compare how he used to see himself, how he used to describe himself, compared to how he sees himself now. All right, there has definitely been a change in Faber's, what do you want to call it, outlook, mood, something along those lines. All right, there's a lot of room for a lot of good answers. All right, we're going to jump back into page 130, about halfway down. Montag ran. He could feel the hound like autumn come cold and dry and swift, like a wind that didn't stir grass, that didn't jar windows or disturb leaf shadows on the white sidewalks as it passed. The hound did not touch the world. It carried its silence with it, so you could feel the sounds building up a pressure behind you all across town. Montag felt the pressure rising and ran. He stopped for breath on his way to the river to peer through dimly lit windows of vacant houses and saw the silhouettes of people inside, watching their parlor walls, and there, on the walls, the mechanical hound. A breath of neon vapor spidered along, here, gone, here and gone. Now at Elm Terrace, Lincoln, Oak, Park, and up the alley towards Faber's house. Go past, thought Montag. Don't stop. Go on, don't turn in. On the parlor wall, Faber's house, with its sprinkler system pulsing in the night air. The hound paused, quivering. No, Montag held to the windowsill. This way, here. The croquet needle flicked out and in, out and in. A single, clear drop of the stuff of dreams fell from the needle as it vanished in the hound's muzzle. Montag held his breath, like a doubled fist in his chest. The mechanical hound turned and plunged away from Faber's house down the alley again. Montag snapped his gaze to the sky. The helicopters were closer, a great blowing of insects to a single light source. With an effort, Montag reminded himself again that this was no fictional episode to be watched on his run to the river. It was in actuality his own chess game he was witnessing, move by move. He shouted to give himself a necessary push away from this last housed window and the fascinating seance going on in there. Hell, and he was away and gone. The alley, a street, and the smell of the river. Leg out, leg down, leg out and down. 20 million Montags running soon if the cameras caught him. 20 million Montags running like an ancient flickery Keystone comedy. Cops, robbers, chasers and the chased, hunters and hunted. He had seen it 1,000 times. Behind him now, 20 million silently baying hounds, ricocheted across parlors. 3 cushions shooting from right wall to center wall, left wall gone, right wall, center wall, left wall gone. Montag jammed his seashell into his ear. Police suggest entire population in the Elm Terrace area do as follows. Everyone in every house, in every streets, open a front or rear door and look from the windows. The fugitive cannot escape if everyone in the next minute looks from his house, ready. Of course, why hadn't they done it before? Why in all the years hadn't this game been tried? Everyone up, everyone out. He couldn't be missed. The only man running alone in the night city. The only man proving his legs. At the count of 10 now. 1, 2, he felt the city rise. 3, he felt the city turn to its thousands of doors. 4, the people sleepwalking in their hallways. 5, he felt their hands in the doorknobs. The smell of the river was cool and like a solid rain. His throat was burnt rust and his eyes were wet dry with running. He yelled as if this yell would jet him on, fling him the last 100 yards. 6, 7, 8. The doorknobs turned on 5,000 doors. 9. He ran out away from the last row of houses on a slope leading down to a solid moving blackness. 10. The doors opened. He imagined thousands on thousands of faces peering into yards, into alleys, and into the sky. Faces hid by curtains. Pale, night-frightened faces, like gray animals peering from electric caves. Faces with gray, colorless eyes, gray tongues, and gray thoughts, looking out through the numb flesh of the face. But he was at the river. He touched it, just to be sure it was real. He waded in and stripped in darkness to the skin, splashed his body, arms, legs, and head with raw liquor, drank it, and snuffed some up his nose. Then he dressed in Faber's old clothes and shoes. He tossed his own clothing into the river and watched it swept away. Then, Holding the suitcase, he walked out in the river until there was no bottom, and he was swept away in the dark. That's where we're going to stop reading today. And we do have that one final reading journal. So on the left, I noted that on page 132, 133, the TV, which had already woken everybody up, and which Montag was watching part of his own chase through windows of other people's houses, which is a little creepy, but I mean, give the guy a break. He's on the run. He just set a guy on fire. He's had a tough day. But everyone look for Montag on the count of 10. Now, on the right, the last time we saw a countdown in this novel was at the fire call with the old woman. What did it create for the reader? What sense? There's, why have these countdowns? They should kind of feel familiar. All right, so you fill in that blank. The last time we saw a countdown, it created blank for the reader. You fill in that blank, please. And that is going to be about it for today. We'll jump back in on page 133 real soon. But for now, Mr. C's out. See ya.